alignment in the Cape Metro is we streamline our testing and our contact tracing activities to focus on high-risk groups such as health workers and vulnerable people. Testing for health workers, tracing and screening for vulnerable people. We emphasize that case management with a view to early detection of deterioration in health status through this risk stratification is what we want to do. So it's really finding everybody that's over 55 with or without comorbidity and people under 55 with a comorbidity, and focusing on that group of people to make sure that we could detect very quickly whether their condition deteriorates and put special attention on them. We also want to increase focus on mass communication and building agency for behavior change. The big thrust of all of what we want to do is still that individuals and organizations across all sectors need to have behavior change, to observe social distancing, to make sure that the transmission is broken. Then repurpose what we're doing with community screening and testing and community health workers towards the vulnerable persons. And then strengthen the workplace and institutional agency with a focus for preventing things in workplaces. So the CST then focus on reaching high-risk groups, such as the elderly and those with known comorbidities. And at the same time, what is very important is that the health system starts focusing on being prepared. Because as we have more cases, more vulnerable people will come to hospitals. More of them have to be investigated for COVID. So other than saying we have a priority for testing health workers, we're then also saying for the people that come into the health facility, which is likely to be from this vulnerable group, that we also want to have testing prioritized for them. And that we then use that testing and we prepare the healthcare system for the cases that comes into hospitals. So what does it mean for our hotspot strategy? We want this health strategy to be aligned to this case management approach in these areas of community transmission. We want to identify appropriate people for admission to designated isolation and quarantine facilities. This will have to be nuanced in light of our testing challenges, but also together with exploring viable and maybe feasible community isolation options via community initiatives. But the big thing we're saying is we will still have quarantine and isolation. It is when we go to the vulnerable person's home to decide who is the most appropriate people that should be in isolation and quarantine, with the sole purpose of protecting the most vulnerable people. So we also need this nuanced, agile, proactive, and adaptive response in local community spaces. And that is to have almost a zero tolerance for not observing social distancing. Find all the areas of gathering. Have universal cloth masks and really have hygiene and surface hygiene. We still have a chance to break transmission if we all do it in that concerted way. And then the rate of increase of transmission rates per ward and suburb would be tracked over the next 6 to 8 weeks. I'm handing over to Mr. Malila.
Thank you very much, Dr. Klute. We are now going to have our District General of the Western Cape Government, Mr. Harry Malila, to take us further.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you, Odette. Keith, the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to deal with our targeted approach in relation to the hotspots. Now, obviously, what Dr. Keith has indicated, a lot of those initiatives we've already done over the last 6 weeks. So it's important to understand that what we're doing under the hotspot strategy complements all the work that we've done so far. So effectively what the slide explains is the fact that our hotspot strategy is based on 2 legs. It's effectively a whole of government approach, and the whole of government includes all the initiatives that we're doing in the province, together with the City of Cape Town, or together with the municipalities in some of the district areas, and then also with the support of national government. And then the second leg deals with the role that the society need to play to deal with COVID. What you will note is under the whole of government, there's a couple of departments that's involved in this entire strategy. So Keith has explained the work that we're already doing within the health space around the strategy. Then there's particular work that we're doing within the economic space. So it's around understanding where the businesses are, whether the businesses are part or whether the businesses are close to some of these hotspot areas. What are the protocols that we're putting in place together with business? How do we promote social distancing and the key issue around hygiene? Then in the safety space, we've got SAPS. We work together with the City of Cape Town under the traffic deployment and law enforcement, and then also under the food security and humanitarian response. The key departments there is the Department of Agriculture, DSD, and also the initiatives particularly of the City of Cape Town or the municipality where these hotspots are found. Then also places and spaces, transport, particularly making sure that we can get our emergency medical services into areas and out of areas. I'm sure that you've read around the initiatives, particularly within the taxi and transport environment around the Blue Dot and the Red Dot initiatives that this government has instituted over the last 2-3 days. And then more importantly, what we're doing in COVID is around finance and human resource management. So what we do, it costs a lot, but effectively at the end of the day, it's to make sure that we save as many lives as possible. We as government can't do this on our own. We recognize the need to work with people in these areas. So we follow a whole of society approach. And underneath the whole of society approach is the whole issue around people also taking some form of citizen accountability, everything underpinned by behavior change. And we need many role players. So these role players include councillors, community leaders, faith-based institutions, as well as also providing the emotional support and caring, for people that are either infected or affected by COVID. And then the key messaging that you're going to see is the message around behavior change and people also taking accountability. A big fundamental part of the hotspot strategy is around behavior change. Next slide, Keith. Within the health space, and Keith has spoken about it, it's underpinned by 4 key distinct areas. It's around suppression and containment, the health platform response, and I'm not going to deal with that a lot because Keith has spoken about it. Obviously, the outcomes, and then more importantly, recovery and vigilance. And you will see that our whole of society and the whole of government approach sits within the blue block. So it's about community prevention, screening and testing, and then we're actually dealing now with the third block around hotspot identification and response. And this presentation, I will show you all the hotspots that's been identified, and then also how do we respond as a whole of a government and as a whole of society in relation to the issues. And then there are the issue around isolation and quarantining, and then the health platform response. Keith has spoken about that. The adverse outcome, we're dealing with that, particularly with municipalities. And then important is when people recover, how do they reintegrate in communities, and how do we provide the necessary humanitarian support? And many of these initiatives, they're already in place, and we're working with the respective municipalities on them. Next slide, Keith. So you may ask, you've heard a lot about our cluster approach that we've presented to you previously. So what's really different? So if you look at the cluster approach, a cluster is defined as a set of link cases in specific settings of gatherings, and it's like workplaces, events and gatherings. What we're presenting today is the strategy around the hotspots. So a hotspot is a geographic area, and I will show that to you in the next couple of slides, with many link cases that has happened through local community transmission. And in the slides that I'm going to show you now, you will see that from a hotspot perspective, the priority areas is basically in the metro. So there are about 5 priority areas, and then there are also some rural hotspot areas. Within the metro, it's Tygerberg, Khayelitsha, Klipfontein, Western, which is the noon side, and then also in the southern region, particularly Hout Bay, and then within Cape Winelands, it's Witzenberg and Drakensberg. The next slide,